have to become visible in how he exerts his power. لطيف لما يشاء. He's subtle in how he does things, delicate in how he does things, nearly unnoticed in how he does things. You know? And some things is very obvious, and some things is very delicate and invisible, and that's actually one of the great manifestations of the might of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd fa a'udhu billahi minash shaitan ar-rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. Once again everyone, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. We're going to start talking about the name Al-Malik of Allah. So Allah is uniquely described himself in this surah, or in the opening ayah, with 4 names: Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, Al-Aziz, Al-Hakim. Many places in the Quran, Allah mentions 2 of his names together, like Al-Aziz, Al-Hakim, Ghafurun, Rahim, things like that, right? So this surah is unique because the opening has 4 names together. So that is a special feature of this surah. So the first of those names is Al-Malik. It's used rarely in the Quran. It's not as common as you might think. But let's talk about a little bit of where the word Malik comes from. So the word Malak, the verb Malaka, actually has to do with making something hard. Like, you know, when you make the dough and the bread, and the dough becomes tougher, that's actually tamlik of the bread. From it also comes the idea of the milak of something is the foundation of a building, or something that you build on top of. Malakut tariq is the middle of the road, meaning the most firm part of the road. Qawaimu kulli dabbatin mulukuhu, the feet of an animal that it stands firm on. They're also called the muluk of it, meaning all of it has to do with firmness, toughness, stability, that sort of thing. These are the meanings in it. When you have control over something, that's called malaka an shay, or command over something is a malaka. Malaka nafsahu, to have control over yourself, is mulkun nafs, if you're able to control your emotions, or if you're able to control your behavior. So these are, the word keeps having to do with kingdom, or actually control and power and stability. These are the recurring themes inside of the word mulk. Then comes the idea of when you hold something firm in your hand, that you have mulk over it. So it's something firmly, you're grasping something firmly. So it's actually interestingly also used when a man is very possessive over his wife. Then they actually say Malak al-mar'a. It doesn't mean he owned the woman, it actually means he's very possessive over her, like very dominating or controlling over her, etc. Now, how is this used for Allah in the Quran? First of all, in the Fatiha we have 2 readings, Maliki Yawmiddin and Maliki Yawmiddin, right? So Al-Malik and Malik are 2 different words. So let me help you understand them in easy language. Malik means owner. So I'm the Malik of this laptop, the Malik of this laptop. But I'm definitely not the Malik of this laptop. That would be a little bit dramatic of me, because I am the owner of this laptop, but I'm definitely not the sovereign king ruler of this laptop. Okay, so you can own a car, you can own a pen, you can own a shirt, but you can't declare yourself the sovereign king of your t-shirt. It doesn't make sense. So the idea of kingdom is vast. The word Malik is used for vast territory. But you could be the king of an island, you could be the king of a country, king of an empire, etc. Right? In America, we use the king very little. This is the king of pizza, and this is the king of tires. The tire, come to the Tire King for your special discount, etc. So they use these words king loosely, but the idea of kingdom is actually a vast empire of some sense. Interestingly, a phrase in the Quran combines both of these concepts. Malik al-Mulk. Qul Allahumma Malik al-Mulk, right? Which is 2 different concepts. It actually means the owner of kingdom. So the word for ownership is milk. Milk. So it would be Malik al-Milk or Malik al-Mulk. So one would be the owner of ownership or the king of kingdom. But Allah fused the 2 phrases together. He said Malik al-Mulk, which means the owner of kingdom. So let's understand the difference between owner and king a little bit deeper. When I own something, like if I own this machine, then I'm engaged with it, I'm taking care of it, I have more direct access to it. But if I'm the king of a nation, do I have control over everyone living under my nation? No, because generally I have authority, but I don't have direct reach to everything that's under my kingdom. I have to have advisors, governors who have to have their own soldiers or their departments, and those departments have lieutenants and so on and so forth, right? Until you get to, for example, a government is at the top, you have the president or something, right? In the old days you have a king. And at the bottom you have somebody working at the post office. But the post office worker works for a department which answers to a department, which answers to a department, and eventually goes up all the way to the ultimate authority, you understand? But in that little department, he acts like he's the king, the post office guy, right? But the idea is that he's the Malik doesn't do direct engagement, but the Malik does. The Malik does direct engagement. Allah takes both of those names and fuses them together when He says Malik al-Mulk. Another name of Allah is Malik in the Quran. في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر. Malik means the one who will always stay the king. It's ism sifa. So the one who will remain king forever. Because kingdoms, what comes in your mind when you think of kingdom? Somebody inherited the kingdom, or somebody usurped or took kingdom by force. That's how you get kingdom. And eventually that king, whoever took it, is going to get old, and he's going to either have a brother or a son, or a younger son versus an older son. Some drama is going to happen, right? And kingdom is going to get passed on. The king cannot hold on to the kingdom forever. Allah's name is also Malik, which means the forever king. The forever king. That's one of Allah's names, okay? Then, the interesting thing about the word Malik when it comes on its own, Al-Malik, it's both times associated with, two times associated with Al-Quddus, the next name that's coming. Al-Malik al-Quddus is here. Al-Malik al-Quddus will also come in Surah Al-Hashr. Okay, so Al-Malik al-Quddus al-Salam al-Mu'min al-Muhaymin, right there. And of course, there's also the phrase فَتَعَالَ اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقِّ, which means how high Allah is, the ultimately deserving king. The king who is the king who deserves to be the king. Also because when you think of kingship, you sometimes think of a person who doesn't deserve it. Right? They don't truly deserve to be the king. They're the useless prince that became the king. Or these people, they took over power and they unjustifiably took over the kingdom, and therefore they became the king, but they're not the rightful king. You know, so many movies you haven't seen because you're Islamic are about fights against the unrightful, unjustified king, and the rightful king comes and wants to claim his, make his claim on the throne, and there's a whatever drama happens, right? So the idea of Al-Malik al-Haq is the rightful king. And Allah mentions over and over again in the Quran, Lahul Mulk, He owns all kingdom. He owns all kingdoms. Very interesting concept. Allah Himself is the king, but then He says He owns all kingdom. What's the difference between these two? One is about Allah Himself. He's the king. The other is every king that ever existed is actually owned by Allah. He owns all kingdom. He decides when they live and when they die. Here they are thinking they decide when someone lives and someone dies, but actually Allah is deciding whether they live and whether they die, which is why Allah says Lahul Mulku wa Lahul Hamd Yuhyi wa Yumeet. Lahul Mulk, like in Surah Al-Hadid, Lahu Mulku Samawati wal Ard Yuhyi wa Yumeet. He owns the kingdom of the skies and the earth. He gives life and He gives death. You're distracting them. They're looking at you. There's so many people looked at you right now. It's like, I wanted to look at you. That's what happens. I keep an eye on you people. Okay, anyway. I've been doing this a long time. See, I have no problem with awkward moments. I have this. It's okay. It's okay. It happens. There was one time I was giving a khutbah, this guy got a phone call. First row. Okay, if you're gonna pick up your phone, at least be in the back row. He's in the first row. And some people, when they get a call, long distance call, they think it's still 1975 where they have to talk extra loud because you're going across the ocean. It's a WhatsApp call, dude. Everybody gets the same message. Like, it's not a different. Hello, is everything okay? Yeah. How's Uncle? Uncle's good. Yeah, over and out. It's not a walkie-talkie, man. So I get a khutbah. The guy starts doing this, and I was like, in the middle of the khutbah, I was like, I just stopped my khutbah. I was like, this is a really interesting conversation. Let me just finish. So he took a full 90 seconds, finished this conversation. I was like, is uncle okay? He goes, yeah, he's okay. I was like, okay. Anyway, so Al-Malik actually has to do with rule, ownership, and control. Let's talk about these three concepts: rule, ownership, and control. Is it possible that you can have rule without ownership? For example, the government you live under has rule, but does it have ownership of your property? It doesn't, right? So there's some level of your own ownership, even though somebody else has the rule. You have, and the flip can happen. You can have ownership, but you don't have what? Rule. You have ownership over your car, but you don't have the rule over it to drive however you want. Okay? You can have ownership over your house, but there are rules in your neighborhood and you cannot modify it however you want. You cannot make whatever changes you want. There are regulations in place. You have ownership, but you don't have rule. So those two things can exist separately. You can also have rule without control. The government in a country can have rule, but does crime still happen? Yeah, so they have rule, but they don't have control. Okay? Forget crime, even in a government, there's a president, there's a vice president, there's a chancellor, there's whatever other roles. Does the president, the higher level authority, does he necessarily control the behaviors of everybody in his own office? No, no. In fact, forget government, even in a business. If many of you run a business, you are the owner of the business, so you have the rule, and your own employees are not under your control. Like the moment you look away, things are happening, and even when you're looking, they're looking straight at you and doing the wrong thing. You're like, why did I hire you? You know. So anyway, so you can have ownership, you can have rule without control. You can also have ownership without control. A man can own a horse, for example, and the horse is not under his control, right? It's not under your control. And in fact, one of the most interesting examples of ownership, supposed ownership, is our body, right? If you think of one thing that you have complete autonomy over, it's your own body. But I don't have control over, things like my cholesterol or, my heart rate, or, I can't control those things the way that I would like to. I cannot control aging the way I would like to. It's not under my control. If your eyesight is getting weaker, you can't control that. You can't control your allergies. So we don't even actually we have some level of ownership over our bodies, but we actually don't really have control. So when Allah describes himself as ultimately Al-Malik, he's taking all three things at once. He's taking rule, he's taking ownership, and he's taking control, which in the real sense, nobody else can have. You can't have all three yourself. It's impossible. And that's why he's Al-Malik, the ultimate. He's not just a king, he's the ultimate king. Now, the other interesting thing in another ayah in Ali Imran, Allah did something really remarkable when it comes to kingdom or ownership. Allah separated it from dignity. He says, تُؤْتِ الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. He separated those two concepts. In other words, Allah says, we tell Allah, we declare to Allah, you give kingdom to whoever you want, and you take it away from whoever you want, and you honor whoever you want, and you humiliate whoever you want. You know what that means? Sometimes Allah will take kingdom away from someone, but they still have honor. Sometimes Allah will give kingdom to someone, but they have humiliation. Separate concepts. In this world, we think whoever has kingdom has honor, and whoever has no kingdom has been humiliated. But Allah says, no, that's a separate thing that He gives and takes away, and honor and humiliation are separate things that He gives and takes away. So for example, Ibrahim alayhi salam has no kingdom, but he's honored. And Namrud has a lot of kingdom, but he's humiliated. You understand? Fir'aun has a lot of kingdom, but he's humiliated. And Musa alayhi salam has no kingdom, but he's honored. So he can give and take as he wants. And then he can give both to someone. He can give honor and kingdom, like Dawood alayhi salam, Sulaiman alayhi salam. He can give both to them. Or he can take both away from them, like Ayyub alayhi salam. Or he can be humiliated by his family and even tested in that way. Or Yusuf alayhi salam. He's being humiliated by people being falsely accused to be thrown in jail. And then he can give both back to him. He give his reputation back, he give kingdom to him, authority to him. Both of those came back to him. So this is up to Allah Azza wa Jalla. And when we think of Allah as Al-Malik, some of these things have to be kept in mind. But I want to dig into Al-Malik some more than even some of the other names. So when you think of the concept of kingdom, what are some thoughts that come in your mind? First of all is its vastness. You know, a kingdom is only a kingdom that's 1 square kilometer. It's not really a kingdom. But how large is the empire? How big is the kingdom? Like the British Empire, for example, at some time, you know, or the Spaniards when they expanded at some point, right? The Roman Empire before them, the Egyptians, the great Egyptian Empire. You think of their vastness, like even Allah mentions this concept of vastness of kingdom when the Pharaoh spoke in the Quran. Pharaoh says, "Alaysa li mulku Misra? Do I not alone own the kingdom of Egypt? Wa hadhihi al-anharu tajri min tahti? Don't these rivers flow under my feet?" So what's he referring to? The vastness of the kingdom. Now, we're doing tasbih of Allah with the word king. So when we think of Allah's kingdom, one thing we should think about is the vastness of Allah's kingdom. The size, the expanse of Allah's kingdom. You know, when I fly into Germany, I have to show my passport to be able to enter this kingdom. Give it whatever name, governance, sovereign nation, right? But I have to now observe the laws that apply here, the driving rules that apply here. If I go to England, where everything is wrong, then I have to drive on the wrong side, and the car, you know, everything's wrong. But I have to do that because that's what's right there. Okay? So the idea is, when you walk in, you are under the rule, the territorial rule of that king. And then there are signs, right? Like there are, you know, the manifestations of its might. Police, military, the monuments, the castles, the military arsenal. So Allah Azza wa Jalla says that people that like to show off their power, like Americans like to show off their power with, you know, the flag and the eagle and a machine gun or whatever. That's their thing. That's their symbols of power, right? Military might, right? A militant nation. Well, you know, Allah describes Namrud, for example, who liked to show off his power, right? Alam tara ila alladhi hajja Ibrahim fi rabbih an ataahu Allahu al-mulk. Didn't you see the one who debated against Ibrahim alayhi salam only because Allah had given him kingdom? He wants to show off how powerful he is. He's going to kill someone, whoever he wants. He's going to let somebody live, right? Demonstration of his might. By the way, interestingly, the most powerful, sustained, powerful nations don't like to show off their might. The nations that are truly powerful, they don't have to show it. People recognize it anyway, but they don't have to do it. You know, the nations that are unstable politically, you know what they have to do? They have to keep reminding their people who's in charge. So they have to keep putting a picture of their king or the ruler in every place. So, hey, don't forget, that's your king. Okay, before you go to the bathroom, just say hi to the king and then go to the bathroom. You know, so they have to do that because there's no recognition of that power. It has to be forced on the people. But when a kingdom is stable, you don't have to have flags in your face all the time. You don't have to have the reminder of who the king or the authority is. You don't have to do that because it's already, the manifestation of its power is actually in how smooth the kingdom is running. Almost as though in political science, the government that is the most invisible is the most powerful. You know that? And the government that's the most visible, meaning you have to bring the armies out and the tanks out on the street, and you have to have soldiers going down the street, that shows you how weak that government has become because they cannot control their nation. You understand? If you think about it from those perspectives, on the one hand, Allah's kingdom is very obvious. The entire universe is Allah's kingdom. But Allah not enforcing His rule in the most visible way, you know, al-Zahir wal-Batin, which was taught to us in Surah Al-Hadid, is actually one of the ways you can think about the manifestation of Allah's power. Allah is so powerful, He doesn't have to become visible in how He exerts His power. Latifun lima yasha. He's subtle in how He does things, delicate in how He does things, nearly unnoticed in how He does things. You know, in some things it's very obvious, and some things it's very delicate and invisible, and that's actually one of the great manifestations of the might of Allah Azza wa Jalla.
Here's what's coming up in the next episode in this deeper look of Surah Al-Jumu'ah.
What does Allah say is an ayah in the Quran? History is an ayah. The mountain is an ayah. The sky is an ayah. The animal is an ayah. My body is an ayah. What's going on inside my chest is an ayah. All lived experience is a set of what? Ayat. And each one of them becomes valuable because they are ayat of the king. So there are two kinds of ayat in the Quran. There are ayat all around us and there are ayat of his revelation. But they both they are valuable because they are ayat of the king. Just like the king of the cup of the king in the surah. What does Allah say is an ayah in the Quran? History is an ayah. The mountain is an ayah. The sky is an ayah. The animal is an ayah. My body is an ayah. What's going on inside my chest is an ayah. All lived experience is a set of what? Ayat. And each one of them becomes valuable because they are ayat of the king. Allah is so powerful, He doesn't have to become visible in how He exerts His power. Latifun lima yasha. He's subtle in how He does things, delicate in how He does things, merely unnoticed in how He does things. You know? And some things is very obvious, and some things is very delicate and invisible, and that's actually one of the great manifestations of the might of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Now, monuments and wealth. You know, Allah says about Himself, Allah says, كَذَلِكَ نُرِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. We wanted to show Ibrahim alayhi salam the symbols of Allah's kingdom. Show him the signs of Allah's kingdom. Allah asked the question to the disbelievers, أَمْ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِّنَ الْمُلْكِ. Do they have any signs of their empire? I'd like to see what portion of the empire do they have? What control do they have? And if they had something, they wouldn't give it to anybody else. I was also thinking about how symbols of kingdoms are really important. You remember in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam when the cup was taken? Why was the cup important? It could have been any cup, like from a water cooler, wouldn't have been a problem. It was a king's cup. It was Suwa' al-Malik. Nafqidu Suwa' al-Malik. Because now that represents, you know, something very high value because it's associated with the kingdom. So, you know why this is an important thing for Quran students? The cup is a symbol of the kingdom, which is what gives it a lot of value, isn't it? Now, that means the word for symbol in Arabic is ayah. I'll say that again. The word for symbol is what? Ayah. So it has value because it's an ayah of the kingdom. What does Allah say is an ayah in the Quran? History is an ayah. The mountain is an ayah. The sky is an ayah. The animal is an ayah. My body is an ayah. What's going on inside my chest is an ayah. All lived experience is a set of what? Ayat. And each one of them becomes valuable because they are ayat of the king. So there are two kinds of ayat in the Quran. There are ayat all around us and there are ayat of His revelation. But they are valuable because they are ayat of the king. Just like the king of the cup of the king in the surah. Allah says, قُلْ لَوْ أَنْتُمْ تَمْلِكُونَ خَزَائِنَ رَحْمَةِ رَبِّي لَأَمْسَكْتُمْ خَشْيَةَ الْإِنفَاقِ. If you owned the treasures of Allah's rahmah, if you had any authority over them, you would have held them back. Meaning Allah's kingdom is so vast. You know, when you see a prosperous kingdom, everybody's living well. You know, some nations in the world are so wealthy that they just give money to just everybody, just wealth upon wealth. Nobody's poor. And everybody's living large because the kingdom has just too much to give. And they just give and give and give, right? Some small nations in the world that have massive natural resources and things like that, they do that, right? So the idea is a kingdom that has the ability to give is more generous. And just in the way that Allah provides rizq to all of His creation is a manifestation of Allah's kingdom. Okay. It's also interesting, again, symbols of kingdom. I'm highlighting this because it's one of the most important things that tell us about a kingdom. Allah even mentions a woman who was a queen. Who was that? Saba, Shiva. What does he say about her? Inni wajadtu imra'atan tamlikuhum. I found a woman that rules over them. And what did he say about her? He said, وَأُوتِيَتْ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ وَلَهَا عَرْشٌ عَظِيمٌ. She has all kinds of things and she has a great throne. What was the symbol of her kingdom? So you notice a theme now. In the Quran, when Allah mentions kingdom, one of the things you notice about kingdoms are its symbols, the marks of that kingdom. Okay, the right to rule. Who is the rightful king? In the story of Talut and Jalut, the Israelites came to their prophet and said, we need a king because we need to fight in the path of Allah. Who will be the rightful king? Their prophet told them, Inna ayata mulkihi an ya'tiyakum at-tabutu fihi sakinatun min rabbikum. The sign of him being the legitimate king is this cart will come back. That's a long story, but it's a really fun story actually in Jewish history that Allah refers to in the Quran, because the Quran is actually very full of Jewish history. There's lots of accounts of Jewish history in the Quran, and there's a lot of interplay between the Old Testament and the Quran, right? So, but anyway, I won't go there, but I will tell you one thing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like I told you, kings often have to claim why they are the rightful king, and they have to be declared the rightful king, and there has to be some kind of inauguration ceremony that makes it official that this is the rightful king. You understand? And if that doesn't happen, then they haven't earned their right to the throne. Or if somebody challenges their right to the throne, is there anyone that's going to challenge Allah's right to his arsh? Allah says, فَتَعَالَ اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقُّ. How great, how high Allah is, the rightful king. Meaning, originally Allah has the ultimate right of kingdom. He didn't get it from somewhere and no one can take it from him. That is originally his. Then of course, another piece of his important symbolism that has to do with kingship is the history of a kingdom. Like for example, a great empire always talks about its monuments and what they did in the past and their victories and their great ancestors and all that kind of stuff, right? وَآتَيْنَاهُمْ مُلْكًا عَظِيمًا. Allah says we had given them great empire. This idea of reference to going back. Every nation teaches their children about its history. The empire must teach about the history because they have to know what greatness they came from, what they belong to. And of course, every nation tries to tell their children and their next generations a soft version of their history, right? A stronger version of, even if they have bad chapters in their history or embarrassing moments in their history or losses in their history, they'll try to cover that part and highlight the juicy good parts in their history. So you get the history you learn in school, doesn't matter which country you come from, the history you learn from in school is different from actual history because it's more propaganda than history actually, right? But history is a really important part of understanding kingdom. Of course, has Allah in the Quran described the history of his kingdom? He has, actually, from the very beginning. How he created the skies and the earth, how he brought Adam alayhi salam to this world, and how he has ruled over humanity from the beginning, and it's centralized power. A kingdom cannot be considered a kingdom if power isn't centralized. And of course Allah mentions بِيَدِهِ مَلَكُوتُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. In his hand alone is the kingdom of everything. Its ability to protect those in its realm. I love this ayah. Actually, this is all one ayah. How can you be a kingdom if you can't protect your people? You can't. وَهُوَ يُجِيبُ. He's the one who offers protection. And then, how can you protect your people? Not only should you be able to protect your people, when you go after the enemy cannot protect themselves. وَلَا يُجَارُ عَلَيْهِ. And when this kingdom attacks, nobody can fight back. They can't withstand. The ability to put down rebellion. Like in the case of Dhul Qarnayn, who was a king, in his story, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that when he saw people that he was going to rule, he said, whoever does wrong, we're going to punish them. We're going to deal with them, Allah himself then describes himself how he deals with rebellions. أَمْ لَهُمْ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا فَلْيَرْتَقُوا فِي الْأَسْبَابِ. Do they own the kingdom of the skies and the earth and whatever's in between? Are they going to try to climb up through the ranks of the skies? جُنْدٌ مَا هُنَالِكَ مَهْزُومٌ مِنَ الْأَحْزَابِ. How many armies have there been that I've already annihilated of people who thought that they can compete with me. Like Allah has put down rebellions in history before. We call them ruins of ancient nations, right? That's Allah putting down rebellions. The ability to take care of its subjects, like سَنَقُولُ لَهُ مِنْ أَمْرِنَا يُسْرًا. Allah says, كُلَّ يَوْمٍ هُوَ فِي, you know the ayah? كُلَّ يَوْمٍ هُوَ فِي شَأْنٍ. Every day everybody's asking him for something. يَسْأَلُهُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. This very imagery of the king. You know, the king used to have a court and people used to walk in, oh great king, I haven't had a chicken sandwich for 5 days, please give me a chicken sandwich. And they would come and beg the king, and the king would give them this land and give them this chicken sandwich, or whatever he'd give them. You know, people come and beg the king and the king gives, and then the king is running out of money. He's running out, the budget is bad. Now the king is not giving, the king is taking. He's like, oh, collect tax. Well, we already collected tax. Collect tax again. Change the season, collect the tax again. Take more from the people. So actually, people think the king is the one that gives. In this world, the king does mostly what? Taking. The king does more taking than giving. Allah says in the Quran, He says about Himself, يَسْأَلُهُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Everyone in the skies and the earth is constantly begging Him. My heart is begging Him for the next beat. My eyes are begging Him for the next moment of moisture in the eyes so they don't dry up. My veins are begging Him to remain, to keep blood coursing through them. Every cell is begging Him. Every atom is begging Him for its existence. Constantly begging across all of existence. And every day He's responding to those needs. كُلَّ يَوْمٍ هُوَ فِي شَأْنٍ. So this is the ability of Him to take care of His subjects. But of course, a kingdom is known by its laws. Any empire, any government is known by its unique laws. Like, I don't get enough of mentioning this example because I'm traumatized by the example. I went to Singapore one time, and Singapore is a really interesting country. You can't chew gum in Singapore on the street. You get arrested. Yeah, can't chew gum. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Okay. Anyway, so what happened was, it was summer. It was very moist. So I had some bug spray. You know the bug spray? I had a little bit of bug spray with me, and a cream. And when we landed the plane in Singapore, the flight attendant that says you can take your seatbelt off, blah 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 blah. Said, welcome to Singapore. If you are found in possession of any illegal drugs, you will be given the death penalty. Enjoy your stay in Singapore. I took my bug spray. It was one of my employees was working with me. I was like, you carry this. A kingdom is known by its what? Laws. A government is known by its laws. Its unique laws. Right? Does Allah also give us laws? Yeah. And a king, like even the story of kingdoms in the Quran, like Yusuf alayhi salam he was a minister, but he wasn't the king. He wasn't the king, so he wanted to keep his brother. But his brother didn't have the proper paperwork. He didn't have a visa for the kingdom. He didn't have any citizenship or anything. He was actually he was visitor visa, refugee status. So he couldn't keep him. So he had to come up with a way of getting him arrested. And Allah says, مَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيَأْخُذَهُ فِي دِينِ الْمَلِكِ. There was no way for him to keep him in the law of the king. Because according to the law, he couldn't keep his brother. Right? But the law is not being made by Yusuf alayhi salam. The law is being made by who? The king. That's the higher authority. Kings also engage in war. Kingdoms engage in war. And when they engage in war, Sheba makes a commentary about kings and what they do. She says, إِنَّ الْمُلُوكَ إِذَا دَخَلُوا قَرْيَةً أَفْسَدُوهَا. When kings come into a town, they violate that town. وَجَعَلُوا أَعِزَّهَا أَعِزَّةَ أَهْلِهَا أَذِلَّةً. And they take the noble people of that town and humiliate them. They do that. In fact, they engage in oppression, basically. Allah, the King of Kings, He also does war. He does war, but He never goes after anyone who is not what? Zalim. He's never, the only people, هَلْ يُهْلَكُ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. No, but is anyone going to be destroyed except the wrongdoers? Except the criminals? No one but the criminals. When kings take over, do only criminals get killed, or civilians, standby, innocent people? Everybody gets killed. In fact, if you were loyal to the previous government, you get killed. Rasulullah ﷺ takes over Makkah. What's the policy? Kill everyone? Kill all the people who fought you at Badr? If you meet someone who met you in battle before, take their head off? Is that the policy? No. I will say to you what my brother Yusuf said to his brethren. لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. No harm will come on you today. Allah is a different kind of king. And He sends His Messenger ﷺ to execute Allah's style of kingdom. Not the style of kingdom that happens in the earth, but a heavenly kingdom. Okay? Anyway, so I'm gonna have to stop here. There's so much to do. But I will leave you with one juicy thing, because I can do the juicy stuff. The next name of Allah we're gonna study is what? Al-Quddus. Al-Quddus has two layers of study. The two layers of study are, what does the word mean in Arabic and how is it used in the Arabic language, and then how is it used in the Quran? So Arabic and the Quran, that's one layer of study. But the other layer of study is actually, this word is very important in biblical studies. So in the study of the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, this word is really, really important. And we're going to have to look at why it was important to them also. Why is it important to study that or know that? Because the Quran is actually speaking to multiple audiences. And one of its audiences is actually Jewish scholarship. But you may not know that, now you know. One of the direct audiences of the Quran is who? Not just the regular Jews even. Jewish scholarship. It was actually communicating with them directly. And a lot of the language in the Quran, we understand it from the Muslim perspective, but when they heard it from a background they already had. You understand? So if we understand the background that they had and then hear what the Quran is saying, it gives us deeper perspective on what's being said. But since we talked about politics today, I will leave you with the following concept. In kingdoms in the world, there's always been this idea that when a king takes power, that he must have done something wrong to make that happen. He must have killed somebody. He must have bribed. There's some corruption behind the scenes, because you don't move up unless you get your hands dirty. You have to have some blood on your hands to get there, right? Either you came and you assassinated the current king and you took power, that way you seized power, or you tried to climb up the ranks by way of treachery and lying and cheating and scheming, basically politics, right? And that's how you made it all the way to becoming kings. Scheming until you get to the top. So when you think of people with power, you think of corruption. It's been the history of the world, right? So power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? That's always been the history of the world. So what? And kings know that, rulers know that. So what they do then is they say, well, we can't keep our power if everybody thinks we're corrupt, because eventually people will rebel. They're not going to stay under our government. We have to find a way of making ourselves look good, no matter how dirty we are. So kings, since ancient times, came up with a formula. We are going to use religion to make ourselves look good. So in ancient Egypt, they're going to have the priests and the monks and the sages. They're going to say the gods have told us this is the king. And since the people follow the religion, now it's their religious obligation to acknowledge the king. The Roman Empire, once it adopts Christianity, the Catholic Church is going to endorse the king. The Pope has an awkward conversation at the inaugural ceremony that you may have seen in the United Kingdom recently. Who's becoming loyal to who? It's a little confusing. But the idea is, this is a kingdom that is endorsed by God Himself,